My Outlook Days, Part 5, written by Vinod Mehta. While we were having a ball with a clear field in the weekly magazine slot, India Today was watching our movements warily. Their twin assumptions for ignoring us, that is, the Rahejas would run out of money, I would run out on the Rahejas, were turning out to be a touch optimistic. In June 1997, the market leader decided it was time to change periodicity. Arun Puri, the editor proprietor, in his editorial pointedly stressed the relentless pressure from satellite television in the news business as the only reason why, after 22 years, his baby would now be published twice a fortnight. Market watchers did not buy Arun Puri's justification for the change. The now ailing but then fit Newsweek noted, this month the great grey chronicler of the nation's affairs, the news magazine India Today, did what was once unthinkable. It began publishing weekly rather than bi-weekly. Mr. Puri, as quoted in the magazine, explained, television now gives out morning newspaper headlines the night before. There is so much television news that a fortnightly news magazine made no sense. Sudeep Majumdar, who filed the report, thought Arun's U turn amounted to blasphemy. For nearly 2 decades, India Today has dominated the country's magazine world with a formula of stolid respectability. From the start, its bi weekly publishing schedule became something of a badge of honor. Newsweek then got to the hub. Satellite TV may be the least of India Today's problems. As many media analysts see it, the real challenge comes from an upstart weekly news magazine, that is Outlook, which has built a circulation of 1 lakh affluent readers in about 20 months. Outlook sticks pins into the politicians India Today has covered respectfully and runs the kind of social and lifestyle stories that India Today never emphasized. A wrenching investigation of rural poverty 1 week, a survey of Indian teenagers' romantic exploits the next. Till the middle of 1998, Outlook had had an easy ride. Praise from readers, politicians, even rivals was not in short supply. However, the Vajpayee led NDA government's 5 blasts at Pokhran set us up not just against the Vajpayee government but also conventional and unconventional wisdom in the country. It was not an unfamiliar situation for me, but it was the magazine's first and happily not last foray into the court of unpopular public opinion. When I heard of the Pokhran blasts, my first reaction was, they have done it. While bursting the bomb remained a much desired objective of the Parivar. The country and the international community had been lulled into complacency by the ragged state of the 18 party BJP led coalition. It had lost power in an earlier 13-day avatar in 1996, desperately clinging on at the center. When it went ahead with Pokhran 2, the ramshackle coalition had been in power for just 50 days. Mr. Vajpayee's blasts electrified urban middle class in India. When Sushma Swaraj said, "This is not a nuclear blast but a blast of nationalism," she was articulating their view. To the Aam Aadmi, especially in the rural belt, India joining the exclusive nuclear club was a monumental irrelevance. It made no difference. Opposition parties too were caught up in a trap. They could not openly oppose the achievement. If they did, they would be dubbed anti national. Even the left parties, after much dithering, only accused the BJP of whipping up an arms race in the subcontinent. Of course, they made sure to congratulate the scientists. Congratulating the scientists became de rigueur. The Congress, in a CWC resolution, lauded the tests. "We don't want to appear spoil sports," said Salman Khurshid, and went on to give scientists their moment of glory. An Outlook correspondent discovered that congressmen not only want the party to hail the tests but would like to go to great lengths to highlight the fact that it was 4 decades of support to the nuclear program by the Congress which culminated in the 5 blasts at Pokhran. In short, it was not the BJP's bomb, it was everybody's bomb. By my standards, I wrote a longish column, "How a tired PM became a bold PM." There are no threats to India's security from any country. There are, however, plenty of threats to Mr. Vajpayee's prime ministership, I asserted. On 14th May, when word got around newspaper offices that the Prime Minister had summoned journalists for a hastily arranged press conference, the buzz among the media persons was that Atalji was throwing in the towel. For good reason. On the day of the blasts, the papers were full of Ramakrishna Hegde, the Commerce Minister in the Alliance, calling Vajpayee tired, fatigued, indecisive. Simultaneously, the RSS was at the Prime Minister's throat for showing no interest in the Parivar's core agenda. The irrepressible George Fernandez, the Defence Minister, had launched, much to Vajpayee's embarrassment, a belligerent attack on China as India's enemy number one. He also maintained the Chinese had built a helipad close to the line of actual control in the northeast. Mr. Vajpayee was forced to publicly deny Fernandez's claim. It was in this unstable environment that the button for the blasts was pressed. The lie became more evident. 24 hours before the blasts, Mr. Vajpayee's trusted aide Jashwant Singh was interviewing candidates for the top job in the proposed National Security Council. Thus, leave alone the strategic defense review, The body which was tasked to undertake the review remained on paper. Whether the blasts were conducted due to a deteriorating security environment, as Mr. Vajpayee mentioned in his controversial letter to President Clinton, authored by his man Friday Brajesh Mishra, or because of the deterioration in BJP's environment caused by internal squabbles that threatened Atalji's job is not an open question. The hate mail, our stand on the nuclear blasts generated, depressed me. Nevertheless, I scrupulously printed every letter. In the morning, when I went to work, I used to pray for at least one reader to post a note endorsing our position. A couple of letters did trickle in. Most, however, ranged between venomous abuse and jingoistic threats. My friend M.V. Kamath described our 25th May issue as a vicious piece of journalism that has no parallel in the history of Indian journalism. In 1999, the third BJP led coalition in 4 years came to power. As far as numbers were concerned, both the party and the coalition seemed comfortably placed. Instead of the troublesome Jayalalitha, the NDA had the less troublesome Karunanidhi inside the tent. The pundits predicted a full term for Mr. Vajpayee and his coalition. Atalji mostly got the cabinet of his choice, with Jaswant Singh humiliatingly barred by the RSS in the 13-month coalition as foreign minister. My relations with Vajpayee were good, very good. I had known him when I moved to Delhi in 1981. I had several opportunities to meet him socially and officially. He was leader of the opposition, and I often found myself sitting next to him at banquets. He didn't say much, but listened with interest. Like Ronald Reagan, he loved jokes. He was not overly humble, but neither was he pompous. He knew his own worth and therefore did not need to prove anything. Since I was a self confessed pseudo secularist and vocal about it, most BJP politicians kept me at arm's length, not Atalji. I used to go over for a tea with appointments easily fixed through his personal press officer Ashok Tandon. Once, when I went to see him, he looked uncharacteristically glum. I asked him if anything was wrong. आपके बाद जयललिता आएगी. After you, Jayalalitha is coming. And then he laughed for the first time. Mr. Vajpayee, not the most media friendly of politicians, gave me a rare extended interview in early 1999, just after the fall of his government. He sincerely believed that if any Prime Minister could make peace with Pakistan, it was a BJP Prime Minister like him. He would give the example of how a hardline Republican president in the US, Richard Nixon, was able to achieve a breakthrough with China. I asked him if being a poet helped him keep his cool. Yes, he replied. They say about Lord Ram that the expression on his face when he was going to be enthroned and when he heard he was going into exile for 14 years was the same. Mr. Vajpayee's poetry presented me with a little difficulty. When I was editor of Pioneer, a slim volume of his poems had been published. I gave it to the eminent Hindi writer Nirmal Verma to review. He kept the book for some time but sent no review. Finally, he rang up to say he could not do it. The poems are not worth reviewing. They are the work of a well meaning amateur. If I review it, I will have to slam it, which I don't want to do. I asked one or two other big names in Hindi literature. They also refused for the same reasons. Eventually, I got it reviewed in house by Kanchan Gupta, who later joined Vajpayee's PMO as speechwriter. He produced the goods. Atal Bihari Vajpayee's PMO fell into the hands of three individuals: Brajesh Mishra, who had been India's permanent representative at the UN between 1979 and 1981 and on deputation with the United Nations till 1987, was his closest aide. Mishra took an anti Soviet line in the UN when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. That line was sought to be reversed when the Congress came back to power in 1980. Brajesh Mishra argued that it did not behove India to suddenly change its stance, but Indira Gandhi insisted. He put in his papers. Vajpayee and Brajesh Mishra were chums. When things got hot for the moderate face of the BJP inside the party, Vajpayee would pop off to New York to spend time with Brajesh. Mishra roped N.K. Singh, a suave bureaucrat, into the PMO as officer on special duty for academic affairs. The third member of the trio was Ranjan Bhattacharya, Vajpayee's foster son-in-law. His background? The hospitality business, or more accurately, the banquet business in luxury hotels. During Vajpayee's final term, this trio took complete charge. They controlled the PMO. Atalji, never keen on matters of detail, blessed the arrangement by not interfering. However, he had a fair sense of what was going on. The trio, especially Brajesh Mishra, was detested in the BJP. The feeling was mutual. L.K. Advani, Arun Jaitley, Sushma Swaraj, Narendra Modi watched helplessly as Brajesh marched imperiously to his own tune. There was no love lost, especially between Mishra and Advani. Vajpayee made it clear to the party and the RSS that he was prepared to make compromises in most areas, but not over Brajesh Mishra, whom both the BJP and the RSS wanted out. If the Parivar insisted on Brajesh going, Vajpayee would go with him. The husband and wife team of Ranjan and Namita were the other power centers in 7 Racecourse Road. Vajpayee may have had some reservations about his son-in-law. However, the foster daughter could do no wrong in his eyes. Namita and Ranjan began assiduously cultivating the Delhi media. They had unconcealed contempt for what they called Nikkarwala journalists. They mingled with Veer Sanghvi, Barkha Dutt, Shekhar Gupta, and even me. Ranjan and Namita invited my wife and me for lunch to the Chinese restaurant at the Oberoi Taipan. I was happy to accept because I wanted to get to know the people who ran the Vajpayee's household. They were charming hosts. The talk was inconsequential and gossipy. At one point, my wife dropped her napkin. Ranjan, in a flash, picked it up. I was touched by the gesture. We must have you both over for dinner. I found myself saying. It was fixed. Only dates had to be agreed. Midway during the lunch, a seedy looking man flashing diamond rings and reeking of aftershave walked over to our table. He greeted Ranjan effusively. Ranjan responded equally effusively, as did Namita. He looked like an upmarket realtor. A few minutes later, another gentleman of a similar description arrived. The interaction was repeated. My antenna went up. Both men appeared to have aspects and mannerisms of cosmopolitan whaler dealers. I told myself as we were going down, we are not inviting these people to our house. The activities of the trio had found cursory mention in the media, nothing more. Our reporters came back with the full chronicle. The three were running riot. We put two senior reporters on the job and in March 2001 published our cover story, Rigging the PMO. It provided details of numerous decisions taken by the PMO brazenly favoring a select group of business houses, especially the Hindujas and Reliance. With the former, Mr. Vajpayee had long standing personal relations. He had even written an indiscreet note to Prime Minister Narasimha Rao seeking his indulgence on their behalf in the Bofors scandal. We got hold of a letter which, in today's context, assumes relevance. It was written in January 2001 by the Telecom Secretary to the Industry Secretary complaining how his minister and his ministry had been totally bypassed by the PMO when it cleared FDI up to 74% in the telecom sector. The ministry had warned in writing about allowing more than 49% equity in telecom. Our coup d'etat, however, was a smoking gun interview with a senior bureaucrat transferred so often that he quit a year before retirement. EAS Sharma was widely known in the civil services as an outstanding officer, honest to a fault. He had served as secretary in key ministries, power, expenditure, economic affairs. In his 36-year career, Dr. Sharma had been transferred 22 times. The latest, which he got to know through the media, convinced him that enough is enough. Sharma, who is today a highly respected name in civil service society, made the following disclosures. Number one, he attacked the Vajpayee PMO. The role of the PMO is merely to assist the Prime Minister in coordinating the functioning of different ministries. The decision making authority is with the cabinet. The trouble begins when the PMO fails to respect the role of the cabinet and the cabinet secretary. This can have dangerous implications and can be a threat to our democracy. Number 2. He confirmed that Brajesh Mishra and N.K. Singh were key functionaries in the PMO and in a position to influence decisions. Number 3. Sharma was bitterly opposed to the PMO's decision to give a counter guarantee to the rupees 20,000 crore Hirma power project being set up by Reliance in Odisha. If the government gives a counter guarantee, it will be tantamount to guaranteeing huge assured return to Reliance for the next 20 years. The PMO has been taking undue interest in passing early approvals, including counter guarantees. When the PMO is fixing deadlines for giving any guarantee or comfort, I certainly find it an unhealthy practice. Number 4. On the Hindujas. They are very close to those in power. It was the Hindujas who got me out of the power ministry. When I was the power secretary, I had to straighten these fellows out who were pushing for counter guarantees. And then one fine morning, I was transferred. Incidentally, one reason why I have now quit is because of frequent transfers. The Hindujas were very powerful and could convene cabinet meetings at their convenience. You know, once the Hindujas called me at home at 10 pm. I don't know whether it was SP Hinduja or GP Hinduja, both their voices sound the same. I told them it was too late in the night to call. Every 10 days they would telephone complaining about officials. All the while they would have complaints. If a power secretary in the Andhra Pradesh government does not cooperate, he is transferred. Number 6. He narrated how, in the case of the Hirma project, the PMO had put words in Vajpayee's mouth when he went to Lisbon. People in the PMO used his speech, and the result was the MOU was signed. They justified it by saying they had signed it because the Prime Minister had mentioned it in Lisbon. This is a serious matter. It is repugnant. The hidden hand orchestrating these deals appeared to be that of Ranjan Bhattacharya. While all three worked in concert, the third man remained behind the scenes. Once rigging the PMO came into the public domain, consternation and panic set in at the PMO. Outlook and its editor could be dismissed as congenitally biased. Dr. Sharma's revelations, on the other hand, were not easy to dismiss because of his widely acknowledged reputation for probity. None of the specific instances of wrongdoing could be denied or contested. His testimony was rich in detail. Vajpayee summoned me home for tea. It was an unhappy meeting. N.K. Singh, Vajpayee considered, could, if necessary, be shown the door. Brajesh and Ranjan were another matter. I had got it wrong. Vajpayee mildly scolded. Those two were pure as snow. I refused to get into a wrangle with the Prime Minister. Suddenly, he changed the subject and launched an attack on Outlook correspondent Sabha Naqvi, who was covering the BJP. I don't know what has gone wrong with her lately. She is always writing against me. He suggested she had been covering the BJP for too many years. Perhaps she needed a change of beat. At a Rashtrapati Bhavan banquet, Vajpayee, while walking to his seat, stopped and had a word with me. He said he had something to discuss. Someone would get in touch with me. It is possible there were a couple of black sheep around on our staff who were leaking information. The PMO seemed to have a fair idea of what we were up to. As our expos got ready for press, I got several calls from Brajesh Mishra. I knew if I took his call, he would try and persuade me to either drop or delay the story. I told my secretary to tell his secretary that I was out of town. One evening, when I came home from work, my mother seemed unusually excited. She said a very nice man from the Prime Minister's office had telephoned. He was exceedingly polite and called her Mataji. She couldn't recall his name, perhaps Brajesh something, she said. My 80 plus mother urged me to quickly return his call as he had requested. In the last week of March, our second expose, Vajpayee's Achilles heel, appeared. It began. Ever since Atal Bihari Vajpayee became Prime Minister and consolidated his hold over the NDA, the whispers in the corridors of power have been about the formidable clout Brajesh Mishra, N.K. Singh, and Ranjan Bhattacharya enjoy. Later in the report, we were more specific. Over the last couple of years, Bhattacharya's influence has grown. A cross section of people Outlook spoke to, including bureaucrats, industrialists, and politicians, say Bhattacharya is a powerful yet invincible force which drives the PMO. His primary conduit, says all, are Mishra and Singh. We flagged the deals Ranjan was meddling in. Topping the list was the rupees 58,000 crore National Highway project, which had been moving at a frantic pace because of the extra push being given by the PMO. The first lot of contracts had been awarded to a clutch of 7 dubious Malaysian firms. The rupees 20,000 crore Reliance Hirma power project referred to earlier was also on Ranjan's radar. He and the PMO were pushing the Reliance case for a counter guarantee which amounted to a gift for Reliance. Dr. Sharma put it beautifully. There is a base law in logic. If it rains, then some grass will sprout. If the grass has sprouted, it has rained. When Jagmohan's tenure as telecom minister was abruptly terminated through the powerful lobby of private operators who owed the huge sum of rupees 3179 crore to the ministry, they knocked on the door of PMO via Ranjan. The defaulters included Birla, Reliance, Tata and SR. These influential corporates pressed the PMO for extension of the payment deadlines. They succeeded. Further, they pushed through the draft of a new telecom policy heavily tilted in their favor. The Samata Party, a vital ally of the NDA, in a stinging letter to Vajpayee on 16 March, demanded a probe into the various corruption charges against Mishra, Singh and Bhattacharya. A long-time RSS Pracharak who had faithfully served the organization for little material reward and who saw the BJP as the natural party of governance in place of an atrophying Congress, was quoted in the magazine as saying, "In one stroke of the reputation built over 40 years has been destroyed." A couple of days after our second expose hit the stands, Brajesh Mishra and N.K. Singh held a press conference. Without mentioning Outlook even once, they denied outright all the charges as mischievous and baseless. It was a commanding performance. On 29th March 2001 at 8:30 am, in one of the largest operations launched in recent times, the proprietor of Outlook, Ranjan Raheja, was raided by the Income Tax Department. As the Hindustan Times put it, more than 700 officials began search and seizure operations in 12 cities across the country. About 120 premises in Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta, Chennai, Surat, Madurai, among other cities, were raided. The paper also noted that the editorial office of Outlook in Bombay had been raided. I was stunned, dumbfounded. Maybe I was naive, but I thought the crude instrument of income tax raids on allegedly erring newspapers was a thing of the past. We were in 2001. The discredit device widely used during the license quota Raj had been rendered obsolete. I also thought a party which was forever raging over the tyranny of the emergency on the free press would hesitate to use the very same tyranny when it came to power. I rang up Rajan in Bombay, who had already been through a lot on account of Outlook. The first thing I said to him was, "Do you want me to resign?" I had absolutely no doubt that the PMO story had caused the raids. Rajan once again stood by me. "We need somehow to get over this together," he replied. The raiders from 7 Racecourse Road made one stupid mistake. They entered our editorial office on the 10th floor of Raheja Chambers in Nariman Point and took over all the computers and harassed the lone journalist present at that early hour. Floppies were removed. IT officials, it appeared, were hoping to find evidence of tax evasion in the files of old stories Outlook journalists had sent from Bombay. Our correspondent Manu Joseph had his bag searched and diary confiscated. We were well within our rights to raid the editorial office since evidence may be lost, justified the Director General of Investigation G. Saran. Simultaneously, I wrote a letter to the Prime Minister which I released to the press. "Dear Atalji, the income tax raids on Outlook's proprietor and worse, Outlook's editorial office are shocking. You yourself have been a victim of the emergency, so you know better. I appreciate that you, your party, and some of your advisors do not always agree with our point of view, but to order income tax rates, I was careful to ensure my letter did not sound like a mercy petition. I write this letter to you not because I want you to do anything. An editor must learn to live with such things. I write this letter because I hold you personally in such high esteem, and I am sure you did not know of these attempts to muzzle the free press of India. Of all the people in public life today, you stand for certain values which go beyond party politics. If I was not convinced of this, I would not be sending you this note. Best wishes and Godspeed with the operation. He was going in for some surgery. I did not even get an acknowledgement to the letter. Rajan told me a lovely raid story. As the searches were going on at his residence, the sleuths were having difficulty in finding some substantial loot. At one point, one of the inspectors asked Rajan if he could use the phone. Permission was granted. He dialed a number in Delhi and said quite audibly, "Sir, problem hai. Kuch mil nahi raha hai. Sir, there is a problem. We can't find anything." The raids on Outlook evoked a measure of sympathy in the profession. It could have been more forceful, especially from the higher echelons, but I am not complaining. The Editors Guild issued a strong statement. The Congress Party spokesperson said the raids are yet another manifestation of authoritarianism and an assault on the free press. The Delhi Union of Journalists DUJ passed a resolution condemning the government for curbing the freedom of press and unleashing a reign of terror on the scribes. Kushan Singh, in his column, came out in our support. Kuldeep Nair, in the Hindu, wrote, "One vainly hopes that the liberal Vajpayee will one day wake up. So far, he has proved to be only a mukota, that is, mask, as RSS ideologue Govindacharya once said." I read no editorials for or against the raids. One reason for the ambivalence could be the extensive links Mishra, Singh, and especially Bhattacharya had developed with the media. Once they found little or nothing in Rajan's house, office, and companies, the income tax authorities resorted to mendacity. They announced the discovery of rupees 51 lakh in unaccountable cash. Again, through a press release, I had to set the record straight. Not rupees 51 lakh, but rupees 51,000 had been found in the residence of an ailing relative of Rajan Raheja. The cash, Rajan explained, was kept in the house for emergency medical expenses. The lies did not bother Rajan. The harassment did. He would be summoned to the damp, stinking offices of the Enforcement Directorate and made to wait from 10 am to 6 pm. He would then be told to come again the next day. Besides, the income tax inspectors would ask for some 20-year-old file, keep it for a while and give it back. Then they would ask for another and another. It was clear that interrogation and examination was not the real purpose. Hounding and hassling was. Rajan asked me to see if this could be stopped. His entire group was doing nothing else but looking for files. I rang up Brajesh Mishra. He agreed to see me. When we met, he feigned surprise, even shock. "You have been raided? I know nothing about this. Very unfortunate. You know, both Atalji and I believe in press freedom. We would do nothing to harm the press." Listening to him, I nearly vomited. He then lectured me on the importance of a free press in a democracy. What happened next remains perhaps one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. I had to reassure Brajesh I was never in any doubt about his and the Prime Minister's commitment to press freedom. The raids on Outlook must have occurred due to some misunderstanding or perhaps some fault on our part. All this to butter up him for my next move. I told Brajesh I was not seeking any favor in the ongoing tax evasion investigations. All I was asking for was an end to the harassment of my proprietor. Could he please do something? Of course, he said. I am very sorry to hear Mr. Raheja is being troubled. He picked up the phone and fixed a meeting between me and the finance minister Yashwant Sinha. My interaction with Brajesh Mishra lasted no more than 10 minutes. I shook his hand, thanked him, and ran out of his room. I urgently needed fresh air to recover from his hypocritical bullshit. Yashwant Sinha made no pretense of surprise. I read something about it. He promised Rajan's harassment would stop. Miraculously, in 24 hours, it did. A week later, President Narayanan sent for me. The DUJ resolution had been received by his office. I recounted to the President the whole Mahabharat. He said he had read the Outlook stories. I found out later that Narayanan sent the DUJ resolution with a covering letter to Vajpayee, who was most upset at receiving the communication. It was never the same again between me and Vajpayee. I continued to meet him formally, and at one briefing he held for editors, something he did rarely, I sat through without saying a word. He came up to me at the end and said, आज आप बहुत चुप है. You are very quiet today. I smiled snidely. There are not many politicians I like on a personal basis. Vajpayee was one of the few I did. History, I suspect, will remember him with question marks. Was he a liberal conservative or someone who put his finger up in the air to find out which way the wind was blowing? A politician who aspires to be a statesman needs to have a moral center. Did Vajpayee have one? That, I am afraid, is a question mark question. Fali Nariman told me that despite all of Vajpayee's inconsistencies, he liked the old boy. I will ditto Fali's opinion. Thank you for listening.